We continue on in our studies of the great controversy. This is number 8, light from the sanctuary. And you might be wondering, what is all that about? What kind of light are we talking about? Well, the lesson is really looking at what the sanctuary tells us about this great controversy and how God works to resolve the challenges that the devil has posed, and how God truly does resolve the problem of sin, evil, and look forward to a conclusion to all of this. We're given material there in Exodus, Hebrews, Leviticus, Matthew, Daniel, Revelation, and so on. Take the time to look at some of that, but don't get too bogged down in all the details of what this is all about in terms of the sanctuary. Sometimes we get into all the little bits about this means this and this means that. No, let's look at the whole picture of what the sanctuary was supposed to be telling people of that particular time. We don't need the sanctuary now. Why not? Well, we see the temple veil torn from top to bottom at Jesus's crucifixion, indicating that that whole system is done away with. You don't need that anymore. The sacrificial lamb escapes and so on, because Jesus is that Passover lamb. We see in all these symbols God trying to explain to us, sometimes rather reluctantly, I think, on our part. We don't want to really hold on to what God is really trying to say at times. Sometimes we think that God just wants the sacrifice. That's what happened in Isaiah's time. In Isaiah chapter 1, you read about it. God saying, I'm sick and tired of your meaningless sacrifices. That's not what I wanted. It wasn't that I should have all this blood and sacrifice. What does God really want in Hosea? He also talks about, well, does God want all these sacrifices, even the death of his firstborn? God forbid. Rivers of oil? No. He calls on us to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. It's an internal kind of perspective. All those exterior signs, the Day of Atonement, the priest going into the sanctuary, the various sacrifices and the details that went into that, are really only showing an external view. And that, of course, is the problem, isn't it? When we see things from an external point of view, we think that that is just what God wants. And we can apply the same idea today. Well, what God wants? Well, you go to church every week. You study the lesson, you get baptized, you go to prayer meeting and all these kinds of things. You do certain things in your life, you go to communion and you pray, but if there's no living connection with God, then it's all pointless, just as those Israelites found out when they started thinking about the sanctuary. If they just saw it as a mechanistic way in which God was satisfied, they missed the point. God wanted that personal relationship with him, and that's what we're talking about in this particular study. I asked the question, is the sanctuary still relevant today? Only as we look at it as revealing what God is trying to do through Jesus in terms of the sanctuary services, looking forward to what he was going to do. And let's be very careful not to over apply things. Yes, those sacrifices in the Old Testament were to God. That's what he asked for. He said, this is the way you are to approach me, and so on. And there were these ideas of cleansing, of atonement, and so on. But let us not say that Jesus' sacrifice was to God to persuade him to be good to us. That's paganism, ultimately. Trying to persuade your God to love you and be kind, to appease your God. That is not our kind of God. So Jesus' sacrifice comes to us. That's what Romans 3:25 says. It was God's gift to us. this gift of peace to win us back to love and to trust him. So as you think of the light from the sanctuary, let's not miss what it really means, and let's focus especially on how Jesus is the fulfillment of all that in the context of the great controversy.